What's the number one bad habit y'all see from landowners and private land?
I think one definitely is maybe getting something in their head and doing it without thinking about, how they're going to manage after, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Let's just say maybe one of your management goals is turkeys, and you've got 300 acres of good hardwoods, and you go and select cut all 300 all at once. And you're just like, it would have been better to maybe space it out a little bit. So I think that's one thing is landowners jump the gun a little bit, and without figuring out how they're going to manage things afterward, they just kind of jump on a management practice, jump on something, go ahead and implement it. And then after the fact, they kind of realize it was kind of maybe too soon to do something like that.
All right. Welcome back to the Buck Junkies Podcast. Mikey, we got some guests with us here today, don't we?
We do. We got Mr. John Gruchy and Mr. Chandler Strickland with us today from the NW. Well, I'm going to mess that all up. You go ahead and tell me the nation.
Mississippi Department of Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks.
There you go. I should have just said that.
Yeah, no, same group as the Game Ward.
So John, you're the coordinator for the lands program.
That's right.
For the state. And Mr. Chandler, you're a biologist underneath Mr. John here, kind of for our district, right?
Yes, sir.
All right, man. We're glad to meet you. This is our first time meeting Mr. Chandler. He's new to the north part of
new to the north. He's been with the agency a while, but yeah.
Well, y'all are pretty much the biologists that folks trust when they want to improve their land the right way. Y'all spent years helping Mississippi landowners dial in habitat for deer and turkeys, and you know what actually works on land. So that's why we wanted y'all to come in to kind of help to kind of really tell people what you do. I know, John, you've been on the podcast before.
Yep.
When we first got it started with our property down in Tate County, we called on the state to help, and a lot of people don't realize the services y'all do. Can you tell us a little bit about that first?
Man, yeah, absolutely. So, like I said, we have a private lands program we started in probably 2006 or so with the agency, and basically, we provide what they call technical guidance. So we have a team of biologists that's probably about 9 on a full org chart, 9 or 10 biologists scattered throughout the state. And for no charge to the landowner, we'll come out and evaluate somebody's property and talk to them about their goals and objectives. And then we provide free recommendations. And most of the time, we can develop management plans. We can do different things. But for the most part, we just try to establish that relationship where folks can call us and ask questions whenever they come up new things. Man, it seems like nowadays there's so many moving parts and there's so many things going on, changing rapidly and whatnot, that a lot of times it's better for us just to be available.
Yeah,
for those landowners to be able to ask questions.
It's a great asset for hunters or for people that are wanting to improve their habitat on their land. A question that comes up for me is like, do you have to own the land or can you lease the land to get help?
No, man, we work with lease land all the time. And as a matter of fact, going back in the history of the agency, one of our big entries into working with private landowners was the DMAP, the Deer Management Assistance Program, where we did a lot of work helping people figure out things about their deer herd. So we used harvest data, which is, the hunters were providing what we would call carcass condition. They were providing weights, jawbones, whatnot, and then we would go in and age those jawbones and work with them on managing the deer herd. Well, most of that was actually initiated on timber company land, on all these leased lands. And it was critical for us to get started to be able to get that data because, we don't tag deer in Mississippi. So the only way that we have data on the deer herd is to be able to know, use that DMAP data.
Yeah.
And of course, it's questionable how we can extrapolate that in some cases. But at the end of the day, leased land, owned land, we'll work with anybody.
Well, that's awesome.
So how do you get into the DMAP?
So that's a good question. So obviously there's no charge for entry, but one of the big things is you have to have really the ability to kill at least 10 does in a season, and that can be variable. We used to say you had to have 1,000 acres, but there are people that have less than 1,000 can easily kill 10 does. And then we have some places in Northeast Mississippi where, they might have 2,000 or 3,000 acres and or South Mississippi. It's hard to kill 10 does. The reason we talk about 10 does is just having a sample size. I was actually looking at a property the other day that had some historical data, and they were on DMAP for 10 years, but they killed 2 does a year. It was like the averages, I can't get a lot of enough data, and really we need more like 30 does. So what we've gone to nowadays, and again, there's no fee for entry. We can put anybody on. You asked, how do you get in? Just call us. You can go online and request a site visit at mdwfp.com. We can get a biologist out there. They can get you signed up. But if you're worried you don't have enough land, one of the things we do is try to put co-ops together, and we've got technology now to where it's a little easier to put co-ops together. I've got one that I'm going to do a club meeting for here this week. That's like 13,000 acres. And
Yeah.
it's probably it's at least 8 landowners. And one of them only has 200 acres. One of them has 180. One of them has 6,000. So
Yeah.
I mean, it's just kind of we can make a co-op out of any group, and so that the purpose of that is just to give us enough data to where we can tell what's going on with that deer herd. Is the deer herd growing? Is it increasing? Is it shrinking? Are we killing too many does? Have we not killed enough? Are the body weights where they are? Lactation? Are they having enough babies? Why aren't they having enough babies? I remember doing a site visit with a club in Tishomingo County that was all looking at the data. I didn't understand it. We went out and did a site visit, and it was all closed canopy pine. It was 2,000 or 3,000 acres of just closed canopy, same age pine, and the weights had dropped off, and it made all the sense in the world. So you kind of put those two things together, the site visit evaluation and the harvest data, and you can tell a lot about a herd.
So before we get too deep into this, I want to know, like, on a day-to-day basis, what are you doing, and what are you seeing on people's private land? Just on an overview.
So that's a good question, especially to have both of us here, because it's different in different parts of your career, and also Chandler having come from South Mississippi. So I've spent my entire career in North Mississippi, and we do different things. But now as an administrator, I spend a lot of time doing boring things. But when I was in the field, when I was in the field doing more work in North Mississippi, we have really variable interests, man. We have as many turkey hunters as we do anything. We have some people that still have a big quail interest in parts. And so we spend most of our time doing site visits, visiting with those landowners, or at least we would like to hope that we do. But we also manage these special projects. So we have a fire cost share project. We're going out and doing site visits. I have we work with other organizations. So y'all are familiar with NRCS or the Corps, all these other groups. We're working with them to try to work on habitat on private lands. And we also have, sometimes we get to go work on WMAs and go, that's how we learn. That's kind of our sandbox. But Chandler, any South Mississippi, same kind of story?
Yeah, South Mississippi, it was more a lot of Louisiana guys that came up from there. A lot of deer interest was the big thing down in South Mississippi.
So now everybody kind of thinks that you got pretty good habitat. We like to think we're working hard on it with y'all's help. How often do you see that being the case when you get there on a first initial site? Like, is that actually true? The habitat's good, or does it always need improvement?
I think it varies.
I mean, I think there's some times where habitat is good, but it could still use some improvement.
Yeah.
But I would say, I'm trying to compare South to North. I haven't been up to North too long, but South Mississippi, I would say the habitat would need a lot of improvement most of the time.
Just on average, it always needs something.
Oh yeah. I'll tell you an interesting thing. It's funny you talk about that. Being tactful. So I tell the funny stories. I've gone out and done site visits before with people that are from different walks of life, different careers, and they see, a forest is hardwood. Oh, it's got to be good. It's hardwood. And then you get out there and look at it and you go, well, it does have hardwood. But indeed there are, this has perhaps been cut a little hard in the past, and maybe we could do some work on it. You got a nice tractor there though. You're changing the subject by figuring out different things. But, overall I would say, it's highly variable, but in North Mississippi, we tend to see a little bit more landscape diversity, right? Because we've got some fields, there's some inherent diversity. If you go to the flat part of the Delta, it's all crops, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you go to the parts of South Mississippi, it's all going to be forest. When we get in kind of the bluff region of the state and northeast, you're getting a little bit different. Inherent diversity. So that's kind of cool.
So for us, Mikey, I thought we would stick first with deer habitat, because that's really what we concentrate on. I mean, we love turkey hunting, and I'd love to see some quail. But as a landowner, you got to I feel like you need to pick, because you're not going to do the same exact thing, and maybe we can get into some of that today. But for our standpoint, I'd like to start off with deer habitat.
Yeah. So, I mean, one of the questions I had, is if you're trying to make your habitat on your property better, what is one of the biggest mistakes that a landowner could possibly make in habitat management?
So, man, that is a good question. We put together, I could think of several potential different mistakes, and I'll let Chandler say one or two. But I think the one that I would say is maybe the biggest one is not taking into account diversity or you have inherent diversity on a property, for instance. There's age of forests. And sometimes we see properties where we go do a visit and let's say it's 500 acres and the landowner just clear cut 490 of it and calls and says, what do I plant for my deer? And you're like, oh, man.
Yeah.
Could have done it. If there's any way that we could do, or you go out and it's like solid, it's all hardwood or it's all pine or it's all one thing or the other. And then, that's tough. I mean, you're having to work uphill from there. Whereas if you see a property that's got some inherent diversity, we want to capitalize on that, try to make more diversity as much as we can of the different cover types. But I think one of the bigger mistakes that we see is people that kind of will jump off into something. And it happens a lot when people buy a new property and they want to clear some of the note, they're going to do some pretty aggressive cutting, and that's fine. I mean, we recommend timber cutting all the time, but man, if you take some of the diversity out of a property inadvertently, that's one of the bigger mistakes that I see.
Mm-hmm. And I'd say another mistake is jumping into it just from a population management standpoint. They don't understand that when they buy a piece of property, whether it's big or small, how many deer they're really going to have to take off that property.
Yeah.
Like they really look over the fact that, hey, I'm making a lot of habitat, yes, but there's still going to be a lot of deer on this property. I'm still going to have to manage that population, just make sure there's enough food available.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We had that issue.
Yeah. Well, that's what leads me to this question. What, like, if I just bought a new piece of property or I've not really been doing the habitat management on it, what's the first thing y'all would recommend that a landowner could do? Besides call y'all.
What do you think? That's a good question.
The very first thing?
Yes.
Man, I don't know.
So one thing
I was hoping you'd say shoot some deer.
Well, what I was going to say is collect data. Collect data. So what I would say, the easiest initial data collection, he mentioned, population management, but camera surveys, there's been some new information come out that maybe camera surveys aren't as accurate as we thought they were, but man, they're easy. And that's a quick thing. Everybody's got game cameras. Mm-hmm. If you can put out a camera per 100 acres and leave them out for a period of time and be able to, look at those pictures, there's a way we can analyze that to at least get a rough estimate. It can also show you what kind of deer you have on the property, and you can start thinking, is this where I want to be, or do I want to, am I looking for larger? And the answer is always bigger deer.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, just starting with some type of data collection, cameras are the easiest thing to do. The next thing we look at is then harvest, again, killing a few deer and collecting that data and saying, look, your does are light, your does are heavy, they're lactate, they don't have babies, they do have babies. You know what I mean? We're trying to look at all these, what we call population demographics. And so we want to get those population vital rates and establish that as quick as we can.
Okay.
That's be the quick out of the gate. So put your cameras out, and then we start looking at deer individually off the camera. The other thing you can do is observation data, which is we've really been pushing that. That's kind of interesting data, just keeping up with your observations, so people know they saw how many deer. When you get done hunting at the end of the day, into the evening, coming into the evening, everybody sits together. What'd you see? Write that down. Write that down over the course of a period of time, and we say on the average hunt, I was seeing 8 does and a buck, and then we started killing deer. We got down to where we're only seeing averaging 3 does, but now we're seeing 4 bucks on average on a hunt or something. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Just keeping up with that stuff over time. And if you don't start early, you won't be able to know where you started to know where you're ending up.
Yeah, we that's what we did. We did some of that, after your first visit, we had cameras and things like that, but our biggest way for us to get an idea of how many we had was actually time in the stand, because the camera wasn't necessarily catching every, a lot of stuff, or we may have had it in the wrong place. It was
Right.
The deer were feeding on this end of the field, not on this end of the field, and when you go sit down and, there's no 1 or 2 deer on the camera, and you sit in the stand, there's 20 standing at the end of the field.
That's right.
So,
and that's good data for you. If you keep that over the course of the season, at least through the bow season especially, if you keep that over the course of the season, at the end of the year, we can pretty much tell what your adult sex ratio is. And that's one of the hard things, like how many does to a buck do you have? If you have way too many does, if you're imbalanced, then we're going to start seeing stuff like people are going to see spotted fawns in November. And they're going to go, wait a minute, you seeing spotted fawns in November? And you got way too many does, we need to remove some does,
Yeah.
Or maybe it's the other way. Maybe we're saying we don't see reproduction, and then I see a nearly balanced sex ratio and all that. I'm like, maybe there's a cow predation problem. Maybe we've got a predator issue or something. So, I mean, all these things, if I don't have data, we're just stabbing. I tell pin the tail on donkey.
Yeah.
We're just trying to pin the tail, and until we start collecting data, we can hone in on all those things.
So I know technology's changing. You mentioned camera surveys. I'm seeing all these things pop up with these landowner drone services, these people providing that service. Is that something that you think's worth the money to get a count on your property? What are y'all's thoughts?
Sure. Well, worth the money. So I don't want to, first off, that is a brand new. I mean, well, it's not in, that we've been researching that for a while. Well, when I say we, I mean the wildlife community. The thermal drone surveys, I think, are some of the most exciting new technology that I've seen maybe in my career. But one of the issues that we're having right now is we've got to have a standard. There's got to be a protocol. So I kind of mentioned camera survey on the front end. It took years, and actually I was involved in some of the first infrared camera surveys where we were when I started, we were buying 35 millimeter. We would go. I was in West Tennessee, and I would drive all the way to Somerville because I could get 36 exposure rolls. And if you hung it just right, you could get 37. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so he don't know what I'm talking about. But we started with film cameras, and we go to the digital, and we got it with but science has to catch up with all of it. And so with the drone surveys, if you think about it, if you do it wrong, you're just counting the deer on the way home from work. You know what? Making sense? You're just counting animals. But if we standardize it, we can account for things like double counting. What if when we fly, we count the same deer twice? How do we know we're not doing that? If you standardize it where you have a time sequence, we can look at things like distance and account for deer we didn't see. Now, the drone people tell you sometimes, some of them, I'm not, I don't want to be negative. Anyway. Yeah. Some of them will tell you they count 100%.
That's what I've seen. There's no way.
Every deer.
There's no way.
It's real hard for me to swallow you count 100%, but that's okay if you don't count 100%. But we need to have what we would call, I guess, correction factors. We need to have accountability for the variance, and all those things are things we can do with science, and it's really cool. But in some ways, we've maybe a little bit gotten out ahead of the science. Now, one of the ones that I see them do, they'll go in February, they'll take the thermal and they'll like zoom in on these individual bucks and like get pictures and all to see what made it through the season. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's real cool.
I'm not gonna lie, like that's some pretty interesting stuff. But to say that that's the actual population density, it's another piece of information. So what would be really interesting to me is to combine that with harvest data. Let's say you pull the jawbones, we're getting weights. Let's take our camera survey at the beginning of the season. We kept observation data, and then we pay the guy to do the drone, and we put all those things side by side. And I've actually done that a few times, and hell, it lines up not too bad, sometimes. But it's not going to be there. None of them. We wouldn't expect all of them to agree perfectly, but we get different pieces of little bits that are better from each one of those things. Yeah. So when something's wrong with you, the doctor's going to run 5 or 6 tests.
Yeah.
And of course, sometimes they just run tests,
Yeah.
But he's going to run 5 or 6 tests to try to get at the question. And sometimes we don't even know what the question is till we run a little bit. So I think the drones can provide some of that information, but I'm worried that right now we're ahead of the science.
Is there any talks about the state getting into programs where they can use that technology and standardize it like you're talking about, or?
Yeah, so that is a good question. We would in terms of the state, so Auburn University has been doing a bunch of research on it. They've presented a lot of this science, and we're kind of, since they've gotten a head start on it, we would kind of lean on them for some of that. And then Mississippi State University has done, Dr. Eagley has done a little bit of drone work. So usually that higher level science maybe happens at some of these land grant universities. Texas has been doing helicopter surveys for forever, but obviously it's a different cover type. That's the other thing, So a lot of what I've seen they're doing in like the Delta, the hardwoods, there's going to be a different detection probability in hardwoods than there is in 5-year-old pines, right? Yeah. You can't tell me that's not different. So,
right.
So we're going to, I think in some ways we wait for the science to be done at the university level. I don't know that we would ever be able to do that as any kind of a service, and we certainly wouldn't want to compete with the private sector, but for us to be able to have them and look at that on, on our land might be something, I don't know, to answer your question. It is interesting, real quick, the legality of it, and we're getting questions all the time about So there are still 2 laws on the books, a state and a federal law, that says it's illegal to hunt with the aid of an aircraft. And those are laws, you can't do that. So what is hunting with the aid of an aircraft? How do we define that? And so again, not only is some of this technology getting ahead of the science, we're getting ahead of some of the laws. Yeah. So we kind of got to be careful with all that stuff. I mean, there's just a lot that goes into it.
Yeah.
Well, I could see, the last thing you probably need is every landowner having a thermal drone and looking at their neighbors and coming up with all this stuff.
Well, and again, then a lot of the laws in the last, all those are made for aircraft, and they're, the unmanned, the UAV stuff is just now coming along. Man, I saw some stuff. I hate to change the subject from wildlife stuff, but I saw some the other day. All that stuff in Ukraine, they're making those. They're 3D printing them and making them in basements and making drones that are like high end technology drones. And you're like, oh man, we're so far behind on this. If that's 10 years ahead, what the next 10 years bring on these drones. So we definitely need to be involved in it.
Yeah.
But I just don't know. That's just beyond my pay grade to know.
Well, we're going to get back to habitat. I can talk about those drones. I find them fascinating.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, no, they're very cool.
But from our standpoint in habitat, I feel like we have a diverse property where we have pines, we have hardwoods, we have open fields, we have some pasture land, and so that gives us kind of a great canvas to work on. I think I wanted to first talk about a little bit about the hardwoods and the pines. Like, what kind of habitat are we looking like for deer? If you're managing hardwoods or pines, are they different for each one? How much sunlight needs to hit the ground? What are we talking about?
Man, there's several schools of thought on that. Number one, when you're talking about managing habitat, certainly for deer, generally you're talking about managing sunlight, hitting the forest floor. The nutrients in the soil are there, and we're just adding water, and that's what grows the stuff deer eat. And at the end of the day, a lot of times deer are just walking stomachs. We're just trying to fill that belly up as efficiently as we can with the best quality stuff. So when you ask about the difference in hardwoods and pine, at the base level, I would say no, man. We're just trying to get sunlight to the ground, and it's how we do that is different in those different cover types.
So that's that's the train of thought.
That's the train of thought. However, I would say how we get to that end is different in hardwood and pine. And some of it has to do with merchantability, non-deer factors, right? So right now we're having trouble moving pine. So I'm trying to make recommendations about, cutting pine timber. With the hardwood side of things, from a merchantability standpoint, quality is as important as quantity. If we've got a good grade log and all that. So I like to burn things. I like to burn.
Yeah.
But, people would say if you've got a financial objective, you don't want to burn those hardwoods in different ways. Now, I like to burn upland hardwoods, but bottomland hardwoods, I would agree with that. So, that's the big difference is the base level. No, man, we're just trying to get sunlight to the ground. But how we accomplish that, very different.
So what are your options to getting sunlight to the ground?
Well, several, man, you got the sky's the limit in some cases, and then some cases you're pretty limited. So ideally, for the most part, we like to think about merchantable timber harvest because then the landowner gets to realize an asset. They get to get some money and put that back to the property. And so, in the East, wildlife biologists go to forestry school. And so we talk a lot about merchantable timber harvest. Now, when we can't accomplish that, sometimes we have to have pre-commercial type operations. And so that can be mechanical stuff. We can go in with mulchers that people see now. They even are doing feller bunchers and things to remove stems. We do a lot of chemical work. We use a lot of injection. We are using, there's a bunch of different chemical options to reduce basal area. And then, I don't know, man, we've been looking at even some other, hand tool options. People are felling trees, but, man, outside of a merchantable timber harvest, it gets to be a little tough. If we can sell the wood, we want to sell the wood.
Yeah.
But when it comes down to it, you've got to reduce the number of trees to get that sunlight down.
That's it. But now again, I can already feel the hate, coming in on the if you do this little clip. I did another podcast and they pulled out one where I talked about cutting timber, and they're like, "Oh, all the trees are going to be dead." Not all of it, obviously. We want to be judicious. So you guys in particular, y'all have a really interesting hardwood forest on that property. I'm not going to cut that hardwood forest on, all of it. You probably got 60 acres or so that are really nice, pretty oak forest, and we can do things. We can kind of pick at that with chemicals. We can do some things where we don't have to maybe get in there with a really intensive logging operation. A lot of it is white oak, and they're kind of longer lived trees, whereas you're not as in a hurry to get in there and start regenerating that forest, starting it over. So you can kind of pick at that and manage it a little more light-handed on some of those forests if you want to. And then, your other tract you've got this really productive soil, that those pines that were, I guess, in CRP at a period of time.
Yeah.
Man, whack them and stack them, buddy. We want to cut those and make some sunlight. You know what I'm saying? We need that. That's where we could be heavy-handed. So it's not just when you say we want to cut trees, it's not always the same approach. I mean, you can pick at it in some cases and be heavy-handed in other cases.
Okay.
We found the fire to be inexpensive and beneficial, the most beneficial for what it does. And I know why you like it, because it clears that floor up and you see all kinds of growth come up. That kind of takes me to my next thing. When we're talking about deer, most people think deer eating in food plots. What's the real truth? Are deer using natural forage more, or are they using food plots more when it comes to a property?
That's one of them trapdoor questions.
Yeah, because they are walking stomachs. I mean,
no. So I would say that is a great question, and but it's a complicated question. So I would say it depends, and it depends on what is the natural forage and then the time of year. So it's a big deal if you look at the annual cycle. So if you think about a deer's life cycle and the life cycle of the forage in the forest or in the in the woods. So in the late summer, the natural foods are not as productive and palatable and nutritious. It's just naturally occurring, right? It gets droughty. Things get stimmy that are being grown all year. And so that's when we really see deer hitting those food plots, and they're especially those annuals like soybeans and things like that. Y'all know we've had this. Sometimes if you got a lot of deer, they hit them soybeans before
they even get up good.
Get on them beans good. So that kind of goes back to what is the time of the year and the status of the forage that's out there. But in general, we like to think that the natural forages, if managed properly, are absolutely going to carry the deer. You think about it, but we've had deer, depending on your worldview or whatever, we've had deer for a very long time before we ever had things in bags,
right?
Or all this stuff to put out there. There's been plenty of forage, and Pepaw killed great old big deer back before there was the super duper rack master, whatever, and before people were putting the protein pellets out and all that. There's been big deer, killed in the past. I mean, we can grow large deer on natural forages, and that needs to be the backbone of your management.
Right.
We want the natural forages to be available, because who knows if we're going to get a crop failure on a food plot, something's going to change with the fertilizer cost.
That's right.
We ain't going to rain. It's going to be all kinds of who thunk it. We want the natural forages to be the backbone, the base of what we're managing.
Well, from our property, we see it, even though we've got some great food plots. When those acorns start dropping, those deer don't hit those plots. So it's like you can tell they'd prefer to go eat that acorn over coming out there and eating some grain fields or whatever we got.
Sure.
Brassicas, all that stuff.
Yeah.
But is it worth fertilizing that native browse, or is there something you could do besides getting sunlight down there for it to grow?
Man, yeah, that's a good question too. We've actually done a bunch of research on all that. It's kind of funny that you ask. I've been involved in some of that. So the interesting thing about fertilizers, again, they're inorganic fertilizers, fairly new, last 100 years certainly. And so if you look at the native browse, and when you fertilize your food plots, one of the first things we do is take a soil test, right? And we want to put in there NP and K. Those are your macronutrients, the big nutrients. Those are the things that, because we've grown those forages and they've been grown over years, they've been selected and the reason they selected those forages and the reason they grow them like they do is because they respond to those macronutrients. That's what makes them cool, that we can plant. Bermuda grass is a great example for cattle. Bermuda grass in and of itself is terrible, but it's the reason everybody loves it is because you can put fertilizer on it and it pops. It goes from 4% crude protein to 12 or so percent crude protein, and that's why we like it. That's why we grow it. That's why it's a cultivated plant. The natural forages aren't always like that. So if you look at it, some of them in different growth stages have plenty of the macronutrients. They have plenty of crude protein, plenty of phosphorus, plenty of potassium, and they just have to be managed. So the inorganic fertilizers, what we've seen in research is we don't actually increase that nutritional plane, but we can make them bigger and taller, believe it or not. And so like if you have really poor soil, I've seen where you can, this is in research, we did a lot of this in East Tennessee. I've seen some of it even though in central Mississippi, where if you fertilize the forage, you don't necessarily make it more nutritious, we need the sunlight to get the production up. And you're not going to necessarily increase production, but you can make it taller. So we're actually increasing cover in some ways more than
Yeah.
for that. But I wouldn't recommend doing that really. It's just not a very good use of money.
Mm-hmm.
But if you want to piddle with it,
So sunlight would be the best answer.
Sunlight is yes, absolute sunlight. And then thinking about it. So what we really want to try to do, and you talked about burning, what we really want to try to do is use these natural processes to change the composition of the plant community. So we want to steer it towards these more desirable plants, which we can do with things like burning. We also want to change what we would call nutritional pulse. So we want to be able to burn and do things that change the growth stage of the plant. So if we burn in the summer, we can actually have a nutritional pulse in that late summer that we were talking about. That could be that nutrition. Remember the young stuff that's 6-8 weeks old? We can, by burning in the summer, we can get that later pulse. So that's really what we're trying to do, is burn frequently enough to change the composition, and at the right time of year to where we can change the nutritional pulse and the composition with our timing and frequency of the burning.
So burning when you do a burn, like in just say February, March time, January, which one is there one more beneficial than the other?
That's a very good question. We get that question all the time. I would say that we don't want to get too forward on all that and say one better or worse.
Yeah.
There's times for everything, or whatever, all things under the sun, so to speak. And so if you have a property or a forest stand or a piece of the property that is getting too brushy or too woody, sometimes it takes a growing season fire to change that plant community. But in general, we're still going to do most of our burns during that dormant season, acreage-wise, for a bunch of reasons. Number one is that's just a time that tends to be a little more conducive to fire, and we can get more acreage done faster. If you've ever burned in the summertime, it is slow. It's nice because it's not as volatile, and, I think you had a fire the other day that was a little volatile. You can have that. But in the summertime, it just takes a long time. Also, what else is going on in the summertime? Babies are getting, nests and fawns and all that. So if I go back to my hypothetical 500 acres. If I had 500 acres, you definitely don't want to burn 400 of that in the summertime. You're eliminating a lot of reproductive cover. But might be pretty cool to burn a couple of 20-acre blocks in the summer.
Yeah.
So we've got that nutritional pulse, and then we're burning some of it. Let's say, the other 200 acres or so are getting burned during the dormant season in different blocks.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense.
Where we are.
Okay, I think I definitely want to know this, but I think other people would too. What are some of the native plants that we were wanting to promote to grow in the state of Mississippi for deer and for animals in general?
Yeah, I don't know, man. I could go on and on. I'm a plant nerd, but I'm gonna give Chandler one of these. What are you thinking from your? You kind of give the state perspective, South Mississippi to north. What do you think?
Yeah, I think definitely some of the natives that you would want to see more. Maybe some like ragweed, common ragweed, partridge pea is some of the other ones. Blackberry is a good native plant for deer. What else am I missing?
Yeah. Well, I'd say this: we group them into like forbs and woody plants, and then grasses. And in general, deer don't eat much grass, but they like to hide behind it.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes we want grass to hide fawns and to hide adults. The forage plants that we think about that deer like, obviously, like you was talking about annuals, these ragweed. If you think about it, an annual plant puts all its goodies into the plant growing, right? Not the roots, like a perennial tree or whatever. It's going to put the goodies into the roots and try to live longer. We like those annual plants sometimes, desmodium or beggar ticks, the things that stick on your britches. Yeah. Those are really good a lot of times. Stick tights and then the devil's ticks or whatever. They all got different names.
Yeah.
All those annual.
You want those?
Man, I'm telling you, you want them. That's great summer forage. And then all those little seeds that stick on your britches, turkeys eat those, birds eat those. Man, they eat the tar out of them. There's a bunch of different plants, but deer in particular also are going to always favor woody vines. And kind of, anyway, that group of woody vines is pretty diverse. I know statewide we think about smilax or greenbrier. Man, there's hardly. That's one of the first ones we look at when we're riding around a property. We're like, man, what's the greenbrier look like? Because if it's all just green sticks, you know, there's probably too many deer. Or we'll be able to look and see where the greenbrier is growing up in the tree, and then you can look out and it looks just like you know, from head high down.
Yeah.
There's nothing. You're like, okay, that's the ice cream foods. You know, they're eating those first, and then I don't know with some other woody vines that I know Central Mississippi. There's we see a lot of trumpet creeper. I feel like the more I get towards the Delta and South and Central Mississippi, a little less maybe up here. There's one we look at called pepper vine. That's actually, I rarely see deer eat it. If I ever see deer eat pepper vine or like Eastern red cedar, you're like, oh no,
They don't have anything else.
they don't have anything else to eat. Yeah, these deer, we better go get them McDonald's or something because they're in trouble.
Well, that's going to roll us into a little food plot talk.
Yeah,
Because I think, you know, and this is from y'all's perspective telling us what to do. It helps us to have food plots
Absolutely.
to go along with our natural browse.
Well, so what percentage is are you looking for as far as like non-natural browse or food plots on your property? Because I know you can have too much, you know, and you know.
Yeah, so some level you're balancing how much you want to spend, right? I mean,
Yeah.
If I'm what's his name, the Amazon man, he can spend as much as he wants to on food plots.
Yeah.
Bezos, it took me.
Yeah.
He can spend as much as he wants, and everybody else got limiting factors, right? They're gonna have to get down to it and try to be efficient. So, at the end of the day, I hate to keep saying it depends, but that's just going to depend on your landscape. So, if you go to the Mississippi Delta where they grow soybeans. If you're and one of the things we've seen in the data is the percentage of the county that's already got soybeans in it. You know, the natural percentage of the county soybeans is the best predictor of, you know, large antler deer. That's nationwide, actually. So I would say it depends on what you're looking at. But in most of North Mississippi, there's not a magic percent, but somewhere at least in that 2% of the property being food plots, and as much as 5%. When you start getting over 5, 6, 7% of the property and food plots, that's not just agricultural crops. You know, sometimes it can work out where you've got a farmer that's growing crops and they harvest and all that. But you know, 2 to 5% is kind of that rule of thumb. Would you say, Chandler?
Yeah, that's typically what I recommend is 2 to 5%. And another big thing with the food plots is a lot of people think if you plant them, you got to hunt them, right? But you know, you can always plant food plots just to have the food there,
That's right.
for wildlife, and not have to necessarily hunt them.
Right.
Plot.
Would you say the summer plots are more important than the fall plots, or do they work together, or what? What do you recommend?
I think they work together. Now, the summer food plots definitely are at a time when the deer are stressed out a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I was thinking. You know,
Absolutely.
you don't see the benefit of sitting in a stand and seeing them in those, but that's when you have fawns. That's when those bucks need to put their weight on to make it through. You know, the lactation.
Yeah, for sure.
They're
And
growing
bucks,
antlers,
they're growing antlers big time. During that summer stress period when hopefully what you plant, you know, in the earlier spring is going to be, you know, earlier summer is going to be full force at that point in time whenever.
Yeah.
And of course, it's always best to know your deer density and know what to plant because you'll lose something quickly if it can't handle it.
We know all about that.
So one thing I'd add to that is it depends again on your property and your soil types. So we have this discussion all the time, man. One of the biggest, they make all the biology people take soil class in school, but if you've got a good, you want to match those summer plantings to your good wet soil, and you're going to have at least an acre, 2 acres to be able to grow a summer crop. But if you can do that, that'll probably pay bigger dividends on your food plot program than about anything. If you can have a big enough plot to be able to grow enough forest to get ahead of the deer for a summer plot, and if it's on pretty good dirt, you know, that's going to have to be your wetter, better soil on the property. That's a big return. So I would agree with that.
Well, so we were talking about food plots. Let's see. Give me a second. I got lost. I got hung up in the conversation with just.
Well, you mentioned a little bit of predation earlier. That was one thing that I had a big question on: is how much, like, how much do predators affect the fawns every year in Mississippi? What do you see on average, and what can property owners do? Is it something that you should be concerned with?
So again, I keep saying it depends, but so man, I've absolutely had properties in particularly the more forested, kind of piney and already low density herds where we saw depredation issues that definitely reduced the deer herd. the overall standing crop of deer was affected by coyotes. And some of that, coyotes is the one everybody hates, the novel predator. They probably are accounting for more problems than a lot of other predators. But that tends to be in special cases. So ones where I think about is where we have a blue tongue outbreak. Y'all are familiar with natural cycles. Yeah. We get blue tongue, and that knocks the population back. And then the coyotes, let's say there was X density of coyotes and there's so many deer, then we get blue tongue and it brings them down a little and there's still this many coyotes. And they're kind of, you know what I mean? There's some density dependence going on there. But overall, throughout most of the state, and certainly in northwest Mississippi and some other places, I don't see depredation or predation of fawns being a huge limiting factor for deer herds. And in fact, if we could teach those coyotes to just eat doe fawns, I think we would be. I think
that would help more.
Yeah, we would be very thankful.
I mean, I think of course coyotes are going to eat fawns, but I would think I kind of look at it more of as like a cause and effect kind of relationship.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like the cause is not predation, you know, right? The cause is, you know, maybe you don't have good fawning habitat. Good cover on your property. Therefore, the effect is maybe increased predation through coyotes for fawns.
Yeah,
that's kind of one.
So by working on your habitat, you're going to make up for the fawns you could possibly lose to predation.
Absolutely, and you're still going to lose some.
Yeah,
you're not going, but you definitely, you know, getting the cover on the ground, getting the escape cover, especially for fawns and where does can put fawns, can maybe decrease the chances of coyotes being able to find the fawns or predation.
Absolutely. And one of the ways we track that, we were talking about harvest data, lactation index. So whenever we see, you know, when you collect your harvest data, what percentage of the does are lactating. And so if most of them are going to have fawns, by the way, they're not, you're not going to hardly have a doe that goes unbred. Mm-hmm. They're going to have fawns. So if they're not lactating, either they had the fawn early and the fawn is weaned, which is, you know, can happen later in the season. But we see a low lactation index. Sometimes that's an indication of predation. And so then you want to look at that two-front war like he was talking about. You know, one, do we want to, you know, talk about some kind of predator control? I don't know. I mean, I used to be not too big of a fan of it. I don't think it's a huge deal. It's a lot of work. But at the end of the day, we're probably more talking about managing that fawning cover.
Yeah, because if you shoot all the coyotes, guess what? You get to shoot a bunch of deer this year. Now, I mean, I'm 100% believer in, you know, not taking all the predators off a piece of property because, I mean, it does help you in the long run. I mean, you don't get to pick and choose what they take, but
there's no such thing as a coyote who's not guilty of something. Now, I'm not trying. Yeah, we don't want to. You know, bobcat, whatever. I'm not trying to. You know, but at the end of the day, probably the bigger payoff is going to be managing that fawning cover.
Do you think those coyotes and the bobcats do more damage to turkeys than they do deer in the state of Mississippi?
Man, that is a really, really complicated question.
Because most of the turkey hunters I know love killing coyotes.
So let me say this. We have some really good science about deer predation that's come out in the last 20 years. They've done a lot of work on these big tracts of Forest Service land. We've looked at coyote removal. Man, they've done some big scale projects in Georgia and South Carolina. Alabama, they did a big project, a big coyote removal project, big predator project. We don't have a lot of science on turkey. Yeah. So I'm not going to sit here and say, I don't think it's a big deal. It could be a big, I don't know. Yeah. Again, I go back to that. I particularly dislike raccoons. The coyote gets a bad rap to some level because he's visible. I mean, you know, they're ones that we see a lot, and they, you know, they're new. People, you know, again, that were a Western predator that's expanded their range. Again, no such thing as one's not guilty of something. Go ahead, you know, do what you need to do. But I wouldn't blame predators, and particularly coyotes, on any localized declines of turkey populations.
What we've seen is we take off 2 or 3 coyotes, 6 more come back in their place.
Yeah.
So there's actually some science behind that.
Yeah. Territorial and transient coyote kind of ordeal where if you kill one that's necessarily guarding a territory, you might have 4 or 5 transient.
Exactly.
We've seen that. I mean, that's like we're responsible for bringing more of them to us. It seems like.
Yeah. It's just like I say, so we just haven't gotten there yet, I think, with the turkey science. But
did you find your food plot question?
Yeah. So, I mean, in y'all's opinion, you know, and I guess we've been talking about summer and winter food plots. What is one of the better things that you can possibly plant, you know, that is easy to manage, but is very beneficial for the deer in both of those categories?
I would say summer, definitely. I mean, I like American joint vetch, of course.
Yeah.
I think it's as far as summer browse, it can handle the browsing intensity is one thing, and it's still high in the protein and all the nutrients the deer need. The biggest problem that people run into in the summer is they want to plant a bean for a pea, and working in South Mississippi, if you didn't have 5+ acres,
Right.
the forage cowpeas or whatever they label as didn't have a chance.
Oh,
Yeah.
let them get up on ours,
yeah.
but then when they come wipe them out, they're
It's
gone
not,
in a day.
sure. So definitely American joint veg, and you can always pair it with maybe like an Alice clover or something like that in the summer. Just getting high quality food on the ground. And the thing about vetch is it puts out a ton of biomass. I mean,
Yeah.
it continually reproduces as much as you get nipped.
That's been the one plant that we have when I think John told us about it,
Yeah.
and then we started talking to our seed guy, and we got into planting vetch. They can't out eat it
for sure.
They can't out.
And if you've got a big enough food plot, I mean, I'm not totally against planting something like cowpeas or something, but you got to make sure you have the area to be able to maintain it.
What it allowed us to do was get into planting some corn, and they couldn't eat the corn.
Yeah.
So by getting them on the vetch first and establishing a vetch field every year, it gave that corn chance with working on the numbers too. And so now we're in the process where we're going to try beans because we've had 2 successful corn crops, and we're going to give it a shot.
Yeah.
We don't know what the outcome's going to be, but
Cool, man. Yeah.
I just wish the coons eat the vetch.
yeah,
Because they love the corn.
yeah, they love the corn.
Oh my gosh.
But
Yeah. But and then the winter one, I would say just off. I mean, there's a lot of options there, but man, like our staple has always been wheat, just because it'll grow anywhere and it responds to fertilizer. And then I like crimson clover.
Yeah, just getting a grain
Yeah.
and an annual clover of
Yeah.
some kind. And a lot of people go the brassica route, which is fine.
Yeah.
Whenever landowners go brassica, I tend to go more like the rape side.
Mm.
I mean, unless you can grow it, a lot of people have trouble growing the big bulb stuff.
Yeah.
The turnip radishes and stuff. I mean, you really have to have the soil really to do those kind of plantings.
Yeah.
we've
Okay.
had pretty good luck for it, but we've had to dedicate it to the brassicas because, back when every mix would have, turnips and radish and all these grains in it, and you're just out competing each other.
that's it.
Them radishes, they put off a lot of foliage. I mean, they
Yeah.
shade out.
Yeah.
Especially
Yeah,
if you have
exactly.
clover planted with it. I mean, I've seen it shaded out to the point where it doesn't grow as well.
Yeah, we've got a mix we planted this year, just something we was trying, and it wasn't that heavy in the brassicas, but man, it is now that we've stayed warm so long, they have gotten up and they're starting to take over. And
If it stays continually warm too, the brassicas, and I've even seen wheat do this, but they'll bolt. They'll go ahead and make a seed head. That's bad. Then
Yeah.
you're going into reproductive growth, and they don't have as much vegetative anyway. But the other
Is
thing,
there anything you can do about that to stall that plant other than wait on? I mean,
I've seen people mow. Them. That's undesirable. We don't want to do
yeah,
that. But I mean, if you we caught a weird. If you catch I've actually seen it a few times now in the course of years working on this, where if you get them in real early and then we get a bunch of rain and it stays warm through November, that stuff's going to start to bolt or put on a seed head, and that's no good. So again, I've seen them mowed, but I think that's just doing the best you can with a bad situation.
yeah.
we hadn't gotten that far yet, but this up here, we've had that we had a bunch of rain and now it stayed warm. It's 70-something degrees out there now.
And if you watch the selection on those things, everybody knows this, but that when it's got to freeze on them a few times for them to kind of start changing their vegetative growth habits and all that. And then also other things they're cold hardy. The good thing about brassicas is if you feel like you're going to have a really cold winter, if you are managing somewhere further north, they ain't hardly going to freeze out. If it gets cold enough to freeze a brassica, we had one heck of a winter.
Yeah.
So that's kind of your hedge in my mind against a very, very cold one.
Yeah.
So
That was good to know.
yeah. You having a little bit of brassica. If we catch that, the last couple winters we've had like 2 cold weeks. And it hadn't been prolonged cold. If we catch us another show enough winter, that brassica will show out.
Okay.
There's that. But
Well, good thing we got some,
yeah.
just in case.
Before we get off the deer habitat talk, can we touch on what's going on with CWD in the state of Mississippi right now?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we wouldn't do justice, I guess, if we didn't mention it. Right now, and I don't have the numbers in front of me, and I'll just talk in generalities. We are still, managing, and we're one of those states that's going to kind of live with CWD. We have added some new counties lately. Just this year, Prentiss County had a positive. Their first positive was during the velvet season. And we continue to see it spread geographically, which is kind of the thing that's been the saddest, I think, to me to look at. So on average, it's spreading geographically 3.5 miles a season. That we're seeing. Now, we're still getting a lot of good samples from our taxidermists and processors that we're working with. Y'all know the highest prevalence is still Benton and parts of Marshall County, that northern Benton County, and then, of course, across the line in Tennessee, very high prevalence. We have seen there's research that's starting to come out that doesn't look very good. In other words, the Arkansas that's had it a little longer than us, they're seeing some declines, direct negative declines that can be tied to CWD. Wisconsin and West Virginia would say the same thing with some of the research they've done. So the biggest thing I would tell your listeners is, test your deer. I would encourage you. We have drop-offs at the Love Volunteer Fire Department and at the Mount Pleasant Volunteer Fire Department in Marshall County. We don't have one in Tate, but we do have a drop-off in Sardis. So, if you can drop off the deer at a freezer or just take it to a taxidermist or a processor that we're already working with, and there are several in North Mississippi. We've got those listed on our website. But the more we test, the more we can keep a handle, kind of an idea on what we're dealing with. I do want to reiterate, too, that there's never been an instance of a human being contracting chronic wasting disease from eating a known positive deer. But, we don't want to take that lightly. We want to try to manage that disease as much as we can. And I mean, again, we could talk all day about all that, but I don't want to get too deep into it.
So on a local level, what would you say the best thing for hunters we can do to help slow it down?
Yeah, absolutely. It would be to test your deer because, and let me tell you why, if you get a positive on your property, in general, the reservoir for the disease is going to be the doe, the maternal groups, the does. And so if you catch it, you can go in and try to, this sounds terrible, but you can go in and try to wipe out that maternal group, within a deer season. We can go in and try to shoot that maternal group and try to manage that density low. Unfortunately, though, it does seem like when we're talking about just keeping the prevalence low, keeping the numbers low, keeping the numbers low, what we're doing is managing the prevalence. The sad thing to me has been that the geographic spread seems to be, and it's because the bucks, when they disperse, they move the disease. So overall, what you're talking about doing for the hunter is testing deer. And then, maybe trying to, if you know you're in the, in the tidal waves coming, trying to keep that density low, just so the prevalence will stay low. And that keeps, what that does is just keep you as an individual hunter to have a less likelihood of contacting a positive deer.
So can you quickly tell people what they have to do to take a deer to a testing drop off?
That is actually a really good question. So, don't head shoot it. And then that's kind of for the benefit of the people pulling the samples. But if you take the whole deer to the processor's taxidermist, they'll take, they'll take care of that part. But when you harvest the deer, cut the head off and give us about 4 inches of neck. 4 inches is a little much, 2 inches at least, 2 inches of neck, because we're going to get the lymph nodes that are just right here. You can feel your own lymph nodes when you grab kind of behind where your tonsils would be or whatever, the retropharyngeal lymph nodes. We'll pull those lymph nodes, send them off, and honestly, depending on the time of year, now, if you hit around Christmas, it's going to take a little while. But early in the season, we can turn them around in 2 or 3 weeks. Mississippi State University has done an excellent job standing up their lab to turn that around.
And you can still process that deer, put it in the freezer.
Yeah, so what we would recommend for folks, process the deer and then keep it separate. You know, kind of keep this is deer 1, deer 2, deer 3, or whatever. You actually you'll get a number when you turn the deer. You can put the deer Social Security number on it if you want to.
Yeah.
Or you can just leave it, kind of as a separate group into where if you get a positive deer. And we do, when we get positive, we're going to call. If you don't get a call, that's good. Good news is no news. But if we call you, we do recommend that you discard that animal.
So you don't recommend eating it?
No, we do not recommend it.
Would you personally eat a CWD positive?
No, not at all. So we actually have the State Department of Health has a recommendation not to do that. That's not John recommending that. That's actually the Mississippi State Health Department, which is just following the whatever the federal entity is that does those recommendations. So no, we don't recommend eating it at all.
Do you have a positive outlook for the long-term deer population of Mississippi, or
no?
Really?
No. There's not going to. So if you look long-term, there's not necessarily a cure or anything like that. We're just in the management kind of deal and maybe living with it and whatnot. Kind of figuring out how to kind of live with it. Again, there's not been a reported human case, so I don't want to. to be too negative, right? I mean, it was just don't want to be gloom and doom. The
Yeah.
problem's going to be is that people are going to lose interest in hunting if we get to. We're already seeing that in places where the prevalence is high because you get if 2 or 3 or 4 of your deer that you kill get to be positive, you don't really fool with it anymore, and then it's going to make it a lot harder to get bucks to older age classes. So that's the bad, but I mean, we're going to keep doing what we do and try to keep tabs on it is the most important thing, and help hunters make sure that they're informed and have all the information that we can.
That's good to know. It's sad to think about that our kids or grandkids, may not get to hunt or hunt the same way that we do.
Yeah, same way. Yeah, it's different. Well, if you go back 3 or 4 generations,
there wasn't.
There wasn't. So I don't know, man. I don't know what the right answer is. It's like you said. It's kind of stinks.
Well, let's get back to something.
Yeah,
positive.
something positive.
Let's talk turkey habitat.
Yeah.
Let's go back. So I know when we first talked to you, you asked us what our goals was for our property, and turkey hunting was part of the goals. We wanted to do, and I know it's not necessarily doing the same thing to manage habitat for deer versus turkey, but they do overlap a lot of ways. So could you give us kind of an overview of what somebody could be thinking if they, they're more interested in turkey hunting or they want to do a little bit of both?
Well, I tell you so first off, a turkey's a cruel mistress. I tell everybody that because deer, when I started, I was quail man, and I like quail still because they do respond to management. Now, if you go from not many quail to 2 times not many, you still ain't got many, and so quail people get upset. But the deer thing, deer respond so well to management. When we manage them, it is a little bit of a lag time, but in general, they get fatter, they get bigger, we get more, we can do things like that. It's cool. Turkeys just are indifferent to my suffering. No matter how hard we manage and work, sometimes they don't do right, and it has to do with these big landscape scale things. Mm-hmm. However, if you're in a positive landscape, and there is very few places in Northeast Mississippi where you are not in a positive turkey landscape, the little things that you can do to manage the property for turkey, I tell everybody, burning, obviously, black dirt is a draw to the turkeys, and particularly burning right before turkey season, try to bring in those adult gobblers. Managing for brood rearing cover is the other big part with the burning. That tends to be what limits turkeys on landscape. Mm-hmm. We tend to have places for them to nest, but they tend to have a hard time getting those babies through that first 2 or 3 weeks of life. And so we want to have brood rearing cover. I always talk about managing for corridors. So y'all are familiar with streamside management zones, trying not to get into those branches or creeks where you've got little creeks and such as that on the property. We want to accentuate that. We want to try to leave that alone for a buffer when we get to logging, because those become really important travel corridors for turkeys. And likewise, with your roads, we've talked about this with y'all, having wide roads is always a good thing. Turkeys want that path of least resistance. They're going to walk those roads. And so having roads and corridors, burning to manage for adult habitat to a degree, but also brood rearing cover. And then lastly, got to have your green clover plots. So it's kind of funny. One of the big differences I tell the landowners, we've just got through talking about food plots, and I will talk all day about annuals because they're the production. Man, they make so much production. But if somebody says they want wild turkeys, man, a perennial clover plot is about one of the best draws, don't you think?
I agree.
For during that time of year, we really want them on there.
Yeah.
Because a turkey home range is like 3,000 acres, so it's hard to think. People think that, I want to keep the turkeys on my property. You ain't gonna do that,
right?
If there's that 3 or 4 weeks that you can keep them there.
Yeah.
So the burning, the corridors, and the green fields not only are going to help them year round, but that's going to help you during that time of year when you really want them there.
Okay. So what is, I guess, what would turkey habitat, how would it look different from deer habitat if you were just doing the turkey?
That is a good question. So really big thing I would say is the annual life cycle of a turkey is so different than the annual life cycle of a deer because of having that big home range, and they have that very, very specific, let's say 3 or 4 weeks when they have to have that brood rearing cover. So they have to have some early successional cover. Stuff that we see a deer could maybe use that thicket or whatever, turkeys kind of won't tolerate once it gets past 5 or 6 years old. It won't be, they've got to have younger cover to be good nesting cover for the most part, and brood rearing cover even younger. We're talking about, having even some patches that may look a little bit like quail habitat. And so we see turkeys in these big tracts of bottomland hardwood, and it's because they can still brood rear in places that never get burned. That bottomland hardwood plant community is still positive in a lot of ways for brood rearing adult turkey cover, but the more cover we can interject into those those kind of big landscapes of hardwood is really still positive. But you asked the difference. I would say the difference would be, whereas with deer, I'm managing for green forage. With turkeys, I'm managing for cover.
Okay.
Turkey will eat anything but a root tag, man. They'll eat. They're hardly going to be limited for food. But with deer, I'm very concerned with the composition of the plants. I'm very concerned with the growth stage of the forage, all those things we talked about. With turkey, it's very, very specific cover for that brood rearing time period, and then also nesting, which is a little less specific. And adult turkey habitat, I don't think we give enough credit sometimes to adult turkey habitat. We don't want the whole property to be a thicket.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Well, is there programs like the DMAP is geared towards deer? Is there programs like that are geared towards the landowner with turkeys?
Absolutely. So I'm glad that you asked. That was one of our things two things I really want to talk about. Number one is we have just like DMAP, we have what's called a Spring Gobbler Hunter Survey, and we've had that for a long time. It is a great program. Basically, it's just turkey hunters keeping a record of their turkey hunts, and then we mail you a book, you write all that down, send it back to us at the end of the year, and then we use that data to track our turkey population throughout the year. It's great data for us, and in fact, the last couple of years, even though we've had an increasing number of turkey hunters, we've had level or decreasing number of people participating in that. So, man, if you can get on the website, look that up, turkey program, we can send you a book. We're going to be leading into turkey season when I think with this podcast, so I would really love to get more people involved in that. And then secondarily, we have a couple of different initiatives or cost shares, and I wanted to bring that up. 2 of these or 3 of these, a bunch of these programs are coming from opportunities we've had because of the Mississippi Outdoor Stewardship Trust Fund. There's a Mississippi Outdoor Stewardship Coalition. Basically, it was legislation that came about 4 years ago or so. So the state legislature dedicated some funding for us to be able to try to work on different outdoor stewardship issues. And some of this is being able to be used. Most of it is getting used on quite a bit of it used on public land. But we have the opportunity to get some funding to use on private. And so we've got an initiative. Part of the Fire on the 40 stuff that we've talked about is a big deal, and you can find that on our website. That's some cost share for prescribed burning, and we're going to have a special pot of that's available to people in Northwest Mississippi. So that's going to be general North Mississippi is going to be interesting. We also have some money for managing repairing corridors. That's going to be more in northeast Mississippi, the Bull Mountain corridor, and kind of that Tom Bigby. And then we've got some money for managing hardwoods. We talked about plantation hardwoods in the Delta. If you're within 5 miles of a WMA, we've got some funding for that. But that's all kind of related to the Mississippi Outdoor Stewardship Trust Fund. Now, one thing that's kind of somewhat, maybe a little bit related, we use that to get the burn trailers, the Outdoor Stewardship Trust Fund. We've got another project where we're working on prescribed burn associations, landowner-led burn associations. So we're going to have a workshop this spring, I believe, probably in Tate County, actually, near Holly Springs. We haven't got a date on that, but I'll email that to y'all as soon as we get it. But we're going to try to have some workshops to help train landowners to do their own burning, and we've got a Quail Forever grant where they're going to have a crew that's going to come out and help people try to learn how to do their own burning. They've done this in other states where they have landowner-led prescribed burn associations, and we had one of those in Northwest Mississippi in Holly Springs with the Audubon Society. Mm-hmm. We've still got trailers and all this equipment that landowners can have access to. So those are our big-ticket things. If you're interested, you can go on the website and just request a site visit. We can get you in contact with a private lands biologist. But we're very appreciative of that Outdoor Stewardship Trust Fund for those opportunities.
And that's mwdfp.com?
Yeah. www.mdwfp, see what I did there? mdwfp.com, so Mississippi Wildlife Fisheries Parks.com, and then you can do /private lands, all one word. And that'll get you to our website, and from there you can request a site visit.
Awesome.
Outstanding.
Mike, did you have any more turkey questions before we
Man, they answered mine.
Yeah, that was a good one. That's a good one.
I'm going to go back and replay this around turkey season.
You put us on the hot seat a few times, man.
Yeah.
That drone question.
We do have.
See that coming, yeah.
I do have some rapid fire questions, but one thing, okay, we might go to this first. Where do landowners screw up?
Oh, yeah.
What's the number one bad habit y'all see from landowners on private land? Because
I don't want to be controversial. Like the first three I could think of are controversial.
Oh, we want you to be controversial.
Yeah, I think one definitely is maybe getting something in their head and doing it without thinking about, how they're going to manage after, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Let's just say maybe one of your management goals is turkeys, and you've got 300 acres of good hardwoods, and you go and select cut all 300 all at once. And you're just like, it would have been better to maybe space it out a little bit. So I think that's one thing is landowners jump the gun a little bit, and without figuring out how they're going to manage things afterward, they just kind of jump on a management practice, jump on something, go ahead and implement it. And then after the fact, they kind of realize it was kind of maybe too soon to do something like that.
So a game plan is very important.
Game plan. And then once another thing is once you have that game plan is how you're going to, keep that game plan consistent, right? Maybe your game plan is to thin pine timber. Well, how are you going to keep that pine timber in good quality habitat for wildlife after the fact?
Mm-hmm.
You got to get ready to burn. You might have to even spray it because you might have sapling that there's just too much in it. But yeah, definitely having a game plan and how you're going to implement that game plan is for sure.
Now, is the game plan something that you guys specialize in helping the landowner with?
Absolutely. We'll definitely help. We'll write, recommendations based on, of course, the goals the landowner has for the property, right? That's the number one, right? We're never gonna come on a property and say, this is what you have to do. We're going to first figure out what do you want to do. And then, okay, well, now that we know exactly what you're trying to do, we're trying to give you some recommendations on how to maybe reach some of those goals and objectives.
Yeah.
Before we get into those rapid fires, you said something about quail habitat. And the only reason why I've never seen a quail on any of our property, but we went out to Texas and there's so many wild quail. And it was like, man, this is awesome. Seeing these birds when you drive around the roads and they're flushing up everywhere and they're just going wild. What can we do as a landowner to help bring some quail habitat? Is it something you could work on and still work on deer and turkey?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I've, that's my, first love or whatever you want to say, going back, bobwhites. And I can give some specific examples where we have in the state of Mississippi been able to go from not many quail to more quail. The problem is, I think sometimes we can't go from not many quail to what we would call a huntable density of quail. And we tend to define that about a half a bird per acre, averaging a half a bird per acre, or you might say a covey on 20 acres. Something that's a fair bit of quail. That's a good number to have contacts to be able to justify feeding a bird dog, if you will, something like that. That's hard to do if you're not in a good landscape. It's so funny because you can go to Kemper County or Calhoun County where there's a lot of timber company land and they're clear cutting all over, like in patches all over the landscape. You'll hear an odd quail, just about in the landscape, but there'll never be a ton of them. And so a lot of that has to do with the change in the way we've used the land. I know there's people listening that are just itching because they want me to talk about fire ants or the coyotes or the chemicals. A lot of people is just convinced the Mirex that they dropped out of the airplanes, whatever killed them. At the end of the day, bobwhites have declined because we have changed. There's been landscape level or broad scale changes in the way we use the land. We used to farm different. We used to grow trees different. We used to, use herbicides differently. That's not a big deal. I hated that I said that. We used to burn differently is a big thing. Just the overall, we changed the way that we use the land. And so the only way that we can kind of bring them back in patches is to be intentional with it. And we've had good luck with people that are establishing what we call early successional cover. So going in and doing the burning, going in and doing the timber harvest. And then there's a big part of it is being in that right landscape.
So do you have to attract the birds to your property, or has there actually been success in releasing some birds and getting them to thrive?
So that is a fair question. So if you look, there've been several studies where they've looked at released pen-reared birds, domesticated, if you will, quail, they've done all kinds of different ways, and that has never been shown to be significantly successful. There have been a few studies where annual survival of the released pen-reared birds has been as high as 5% or something, annual survival. Wild birds don't live at much more than 20%. I mean, that's good annual survival for a wild quail. Where they have been successful, what they call wild relocation or translocation of wild birds, and they've been doing that in parts of Texas, Florida, Georgia for a little while. We have never done one of those studies in Mississippi. Where would we go to get the wild quail?
Is it against the law to transfer quail across state?
Well, it's against. Yes, certainly it is against the law to transport, native bobwhites across state lines. However,
I was coming up with a way to shoot a net over these birds in Texas and bring them back to Mississippi.
It is against the law across state lines for sure. But even internally, it's illegal to possess native wildlife. So even people that want to, we permit like the people that trap squirrels and stuff, but it's illegal to possess live native wildlife. So
that's good to know.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I'm just saying. So, but there's been discussions about doing some research projects on that. But again, that's not long term. That's not sustainable. Now, I will tell you, there are very few places, and one of my funny ones is like Lafayette County is a funny county because if you go way back, like 50 years ago, people talk about quail hunting in Lafayette County. 100 years ago, big quail county, no quail now. But you can absolutely go in there and do a 100-acre clear cut in Lafayette County, and I'll be dang if you don't hear a bobwhite but now that's a fleeting cover type, right? In 5 years, that cutover's going to grow up, and it ain't going to be. So there's very few places that I go in the state of Mississippi where I don't believe that we don't have wild birds in the landscape sufficient enough to populate if you make the cover type. And one of the biggest examples I give of that is the Delta. Some of these places where they went and planted CRP hardwoods in big acreages, years ago, for the first 5 years, it was covered up in quail.
Yeah.
Now, when I'm looking around in the Delta going, where did this quail come from? There's not even a ditch. You know, I mean, how did they even get find this cover? And I'll be dang if they don't, So I don't feel like that is necessarily the limiting factor. The limiting factor is always going to be having annual survival great enough, getting those birds through the year to where they can reproduce. And that's and then having that reproduction sustained, because what happens is bobwhites, even if we make a patch of positive habitat that's, let's say, 500 acres big, they're going to disperse off that. They're not loyal. They're just going to do it. That's natural. They're going to do it. And then we don't have what? We don't have any dispersing on.
Yeah.
And so that's always our quail bird issue.
That was going to be my question. We've got a little over 50 acres, or right at 50 acres of nothing but just, a grass field. You've seen it.
Yeah, yeah.
And if we dedicated that just to quail habitat, I was wondering if that was too small of a piece of property, if it was.
Certainly it couldn't hurt. You could have some production on that, but it's the landscape. Think about it in terms of 2,000-acre landscape. So what's going on in the landscape around you? I would have thought y'all would have in that landscape. I wouldn't have called it completely negative.
I've never heard of quail out there. I don't know why. There's a lot of cow pasture and things like that, grass around, and I've never heard one.
I don't know yet. That is one of the enigmas. Some of these landscapes I drive around and think not too bad, and you don't hear any.
Our neighbor, him, Chuck. You do some work with him. He's got the first covey on his property that he's seen since he's had that property.
Yeah,
that excited me so much. I was like, man, what can we do? What can we do to draw some of them to make art?
If you go south of Chuck, there's decent habitat all the way through to Como and all that. I mean, there's decent habitat, so they ought to have a little bit, but it's interesting.
Well, let's get to these rapid fires, and I don't have a whole lot of them, but first one, either one of you can take it or y'all can rotate out. What's the best month to burn in Mississippi?
Yes. No.
There's not one. One where it's not too dry, right?
I mean, I feel like maybe it's what your management goals are and maybe what problems you might have within a particular stand that you're burning. Like, if you have a sapling problem, you might would want to burn in maybe the growing season fall to maybe kind of control that at a later date. If you want to hunt in the spring, you might want to go in there and do a February or early March burn to have some black to maybe shoot a turkey in.
Yeah, that was what my answer would be. When's turkey season open?
Yeah, no, I would say if you're turkey, I would say what he said, February, March. If you're deer, maybe do a little June.
All right, next one. Worst thing a hunter can do to his land.
I think you answered that one.
You think so?
Oh, yeah. Do anything that takes away the diversity.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just do everything to all of. All right. If you've got 500.
I got one for you. Yeah. If there was only one thing a person could do to make their property better, what would it be?
One thing.
One thing.
If it's, I think if it's an upland, if it's dry or upland, I'd say burn.
Okay.
But if it's, I can go across all of them. Manage the forest. In the eastern United States, active forest management.
More important food plots, more important.
Yeah. Active forest management.
Well, this is going to take me to my next one. In counties where you can, does supplemental feeding help or hurt?
Ooh.
Whoop.
I
Or maybe I should say, if you could do away with supplemental feeding.
Ooh, gosh, that's even worse. No, all right. I got the diplomatic supplement.
There you go.
So if we first off, it is entirely legal for landowners outside the CWD zone to supplementally feed whitetail deer. That is legal. There are things that are legal that are not always a great idea. It's completely legal for me to eat 5 quarter pounders every day of my life, until as long as I get that's legal.
Well,
Not a great idea. It's legal to smoke cigarettes.
mhm.
Not a good idea. So just because something's legal, don't make it great. And if you look at all the science that we have, there's very little science that would support supplementally feeding, even high protein supplements, that would result in a direct increase of deer antler size on a landscape scale of an open population. So yes, in a fence somewhere or whatever, we have a controlled herd where we can, just pour the feed to them. Yeah. But in an open population, deer are always going to balance their diet. Even if we feed them something that's like 30% crude protein, they're going to have to eat. They're going to have what they call post-ingestive consequence. They have to balance. This is not very rapid. I'm not doing a rapid fire.
Yeah.
No, that's good.
Yeah, no. But anyway, they're gonna balance that out. So in general, not a lot of benefits necessarily. Now, direct negatives to deer, not as much as we maybe thought. I mean, they've done some work with outside of CWD, obviously, but you're concentrating deer artificially, and there are some things for deer that are bad. We've talked a lot about aflatoxins. We've seen some new research, and so if you look at that, aflatoxins are mainly going to be in the growing season. When it's hot, and they're everywhere. So if you have corn, they're going to end up having aflatoxin. Maybe not super direct negative to a deer. We're talking about deer. Outside of concentrating animals to make things like CWD more prevalent, feeding, bad. But for wild turkeys, man, the stuff that we're seeing now, the aflatoxin stuff, but stuff about coccidia. So toxoplasmosis gondii, basically everything that a bird can get can be made bad by concentrating raccoons. You ever see raccoons at your feeding? By concentrating raccoons, by concentrating other animals, other birds, they're pooping and whizzing everywhere, and it's just bad.
And I'd say another thing about the feeding is don't let it overshadow other things you can do on the property, right?
Yeah.
Because filling a feeder is a lot easier than managing your timber. I've seen it on many properties
Yep.
where they've got 10 to 15 feeders because it's easy, and then you look at their timber or their food plots, and they're not putting a lot of time and effort.
Yeah.
So what's one tool every habitat guy should own? That ought to be an easy one.
Ooh. One tool.
One tool.
I mean, drip torch.
That's what I was. That's exactly what I thought you was going to say.
Doing tractor implement.
Yeah.
No, you got it.
That's what I thought John
Yeah,
would say.
no,
drip torch.
Yeah, let's go. Let's rapid.
When I thought of that one, I was like, I bet they say drip torch.
Yeah. No.
All right, here's the last one I have, and this one you might could talk on. But what's the one thing you wish every hunter knew about habitat? What do you wish they knew?
I would say one thing that I wish that they would maybe knew or understand that it doesn't necessarily happen overnight, right? I mean, it's
patience.
Yeah, you got to have patience. It's going to take time to get habitat right, and it's going to take time to maybe see the benefits of the habitat that you made right. So I would think that that's definitely one thing that, landowners could, and hunters just in general, could definitely benefit from understanding.
Well, that's excellent, right?
That was
there.
pretty much what I
I
was
think-
going to say.
You did hear what he said, didn't you? Patience, man.
I know,
Patience.
Well, I mean, and I'm pretty sure that's what you told us, John, when we first started.
Yeah.
This ain't gonna happen overnight, guys.
Yeah.
You want to? I mean, the goal for most people is to be able to get out there and see deer when you're hunting. Hopefully, shoot something. But changing the habitat is slow. It's not something that you're going to come in and fix in one season. It's just not going to happen. We've found that out. I mean,
Yes.
But when you step back and look at it, and you've been doing it 3, 5, 10 years, it's amazing how much you've changed and what you can see it's doing for the animal, the herd health, the turkeys, everything on your property. And that's why I think it's really crucial, important. And I appreciate you guys for the jobs y'all do and
No doubt.
to come out and help us as landowners, as hunters, as stewards of this earth that we're on right now. It's very important for everybody to do. So thank y'all.
Oh, man.
Yep.
Appreciate it.
Mike, is there anything else you had today?
No, that's got us. That's going to close us out. Y'all make sure y'all go to the Mississippi Department of Wildlife, Fishery, and Parks website. If y'all have any questions, I'm sure they have an area there where you can ask questions, and y'all go through and look. There's a lot of interesting things, a lot of beneficial things on that website, and utilizing John and Chandler and that group, guys that come in and do site visits on your property and help you get started with a plan or help you get on a plan. Y'all don't miss out on that opportunity. So,
yeah, John, is there anything you and Chandler want to plug or let people know about? You mentioned some of the good programs coming up.
Yeah, no, we plugged it, man. That Prescribed Burn Association, we need members, and all the fire stuff we've got going on. So go to the website.
And
DMAP. Yeah.
DMAP. I want to. We after this, I need to talk because Chuck and Zane told me I needed to talk to you about getting my property enrolled in it because we are not.
We have a pretty good library on our private lands page of like just articles that we write just for different management considerations and everything that we kind of keep people up to date on and just give information out as much as we can.
Awesome. I know that you can follow the Mississippi Department of Wildlife, Fish, and Parks on social media because it come across my feed on TikTok the other day. I believe there's a podcast. Didn't you go do their podcast?
There's a podcast. I have done it.
And I know I've seen Mr. John on it a few times. So y'all check that out too. There's some great information out there, and I think this is all something we could do a better job at. It's going to improve your hunting. And, man, you can't beat being outdoors. Give you something to do year-round.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah. All right. Well, guys, thank y'all for coming out with us, but it's time for us to get out of here.
Man, yeah.
We gone.